Here we are. Thank you all for coming. We've got a bit of a brainstorming intellectual session coming up now. That's one of the most important things in the AV industry, to my mind, has been utterly ignored. And we've tried to draw attention to it, but really it's gaining traction now because time's moving on, and that's the 700 megahertz clearance. So today we've got probably people, those most qualified to talk about it, what it is, what it means for those on the ground, for those people on the ground having to cope with it, and whether we can find a way out of it, and what the sensible thing is. And we've got people at various parts of the game here who have been involved with it all. I think what might be an idea, rather than me to rattle off who they are, is if we can start at the end and explain who you are and what your expertise is, so we can actually tell the audience here. Are you all within the industry? Are you here for interest, or are you involved in this, in the consequences of this 700 megahertz clearance? Are you you users, or are you here for general interest, or general interest? Okay, all right. I was trying to think how to pitch it, so I wasn't quite sure. I was trying to keep the audience fairly okay with it. Right. Jonathan, do you want to start off the end?
I'm Jonathan Edwards. I work at Terry Tew Sound Light, and I'm the RF coordinator there, planning the shows, looking after the kit, prepping the kit, maintaining the kit, and making sure that things run smoothly from the RF end of the company.
So he's a man on the ground. The practical end hits him hugely.
It does.
My name's Andy Tapley. I'm a sound supervisor for BBC Studioworks. So my job primarily is to look after the sound side for a production. Normally I'm working on quite large light entertainment shows, one which is Strictly Come Dancing, which is a very popular Saturday Night Live television show. My take on this really is to looking at where we are going to be in a year's time with losing a load of radio mic frequencies. We generally use up to about 125 spot frequencies on that show alone. So with the switch off, we're going to be massively affected by it. So I'm bringing that perspective, but also working with productions, making them aware that we are what faces us in a year's time. So that's me.
Okay, Alan.
Okay, hello. You got me? Okay, great. Yeah, my name is Alan March. I suppose I'm here really to represent the manufacturing side of things rather than the boots on the street side of things. I work for Sennheiser. I've worked for Sennheiser for about 11 years now, and before that I worked for Shure for 21 years. So I've seen the rise of the radio microphone, and I spend most of my time trying to prevent the demise of it, shall we say. So yeah, I'm on the steering committee for the British Entertainment Industry Radio Group, who've worked for the last 15 years lobbying government and Ofcom to try to bring attention to the fact that we exist to start off with, and with increasing I'd like to think, success. We've just had a compensation deal announced in the UK, which I don't think would have happened without Berg. I'm also vice president of an organisation called APWPT, which is a global lobbying organisation for the PMSE industry. 56 countries membership for that. I spend a lot of time going to CPT meetings, dealing with regulators, not just in the UK, but also from all around the CPT region, which is 48 countries. And I'm also the vice chair of an ETSI standards organisation called TG17. And one of the responsibilities of TG17 is to look after and maintain and update the harmonised European standards for radio microphones. I'll stop there.
Well, he's a man with a finger on the pulse, no doubt about it, Alan, which is why you're here really as well. So very, very valuable addition. Thank you. Terry.
So my name's Terry Tew. I supply the 120 radio mics to Andy to use on Strictly Come Dancing, and they're 120 channels of Sennheiser radio mics that are supplied by Alan, who works for Sennheiser. So the 700 switch off for us is 100 megs of spectrum, which we put the 120 radio mics for Strictly Come Dancing into. So theoretically, once that happens next March, if we can't move to different spectrum, then there's no radio mics on Strictly Come Dancing, and that's the prime time Saturday night BBC show. So we're working with the manufacturers and Ofcom in the UK to free up other clean spectrum so that TV shows can carry on to be made to actually obviously 700 clearance is going to 5G. They're going to want content to stream on 5G. We're the ones who make it. So in order to carry on making it, we've got to move to other spectrum, to release spectrum for 5G, if that makes sense.
Yeah, this is a very complex process, you know, but has hugely practical ramifications for everybody concerning any kind of production. I mean, it's pretty bloody disastrous for most people with large-scale productions. Alan, just summarise, if you would, what the clearance is and what the immediate problems are with it.
Okay.
And the challenges and opportunities, perhaps. I mean, you know, in theory, if I don't want to go too far with this, because there's too much up in the air, isn't there?
Glass half empty, glass half
I know,
full.
I know.
So a bit of history for the last, well, ever since Starlight Express, really, which kind of opened up access to UHF spectrum for radio microphones. We've had no problem. We've shared frequencies with the broadcast sector. The broadcast sector had quite a large chunk of spectrum allocated to it, and we slotted we continue to slot radio microphones into the gaps that aren't used in any given one geographical location in order to build the big radio systems that make up the sort of stuff that we hear on big productions. What has happened over the last 10 to 15 years, should we say, is that there's been a slow, if you like, salami slicing of that spectrum in favour of what we call IMT, International Mobile Telecommunications. They have been and continue to be very hungry for frequencies. They've operated internationally, lobbying very hard at the highest level, all the way up to the ITU, which is effectively a United Nations organisation, which is the highest level of spectrum management across the whole planet. And they've been very successful. So first of all, we lost the 800 megahertz band, and then as a result of a kind of guerrilla action at the World Radio Conference in 2012, 700 came on the agenda for Region 1. And while it wasn't sanctioned completely at World Radio Conference 12, in the meantime, between 12 and 15, which was the next radio conference, the mobile sector worked very hard in order to cement that decision. And now that's why we're in the situation why 700 megahertz is being effectively sold off. Some countries it's already been sold off, France and Germany. In the UK, we still have access to it for the time being, but that will cease, we're told, by Q2 2020. So this causes problems for large productions, but it also causes huge problems for manufacturers as well. So while in the past I don't think manufacturers have been necessarily very good at changing their technology, now with this situation, manufacturers are having to very seriously look at what could be done in order to address the spectrum shortfall. So I'll stop there.
Would it be as simple as just kit not working? Or it wouldn't ever be allowed to reach that point, would it? I mean, presumably there would be a way of still running kit before and after the band change.
I mean, what will happen is once the spectrum is sold off to the mobile guys and the networks are rolled out, if you turn a radio microphone on those frequencies, turn a radio microphone on any of those frequencies, it won't work. You'll just get noise and hash and all the rest of it. So, you know, productions will continue, but whether or not they'll be able to continue to the same very high standard that wireless products enable us to do is questionable. But as I say, manufacturers are looking at alternative technologies. Part of the job that I do is to go around to try to open up new frequency bands, which go some way to mitigating the loss of access to 700. And I do that on an international level. But frequency planning is going to have to get better. I think education. I mean, Terry's organisation are very professional. They've been doing it for a long time. But as you go down the food chain, we find that the knowledge and understanding of how RF works and how people can plan a system as efficiently as possible gets worse. So education is a really important part of all of this for the people on the street that actually roll the systems out.
Yeah. How do you go on? You were going to say something.
No. I mean, obviously this is happening. It's going to be switched off at the end of March next year.
End of March.
Yeah. Q2.
So
lots of time.
We've got 14 months with product only just coming out of manufacturers for testing, let alone buying thousands. They've got to gear up to manufacture thousands of systems, along with manufacturing everything else they do. But we've got to get TV shows out the door. while this is all happening as well, while we're testing
Well, it's
alongside
not
our
going to happen,
normal-
is it? Or is it a state of it has to happen?
It
or
has to happen, yeah.
Okay.
So we have to make the new spectrum that Ofcom has given us work, but we've only got 14 months to do it.
I think also that there's been part of the problem is that productions just aren't aware at the moment that this is happening and it's just around the corner. So
Why aren't they aware?
Just because I just don't. They assume that there will always be a solution because we don't.
see.
So they say, well, we'll just hire from someone else. You know, it's not a question of supplier. It's just that the kit isn't there. So what I'm trying to do is raise awareness and make productions aware that this is the situation. So, I mean, there is light at the end of the tunnel. I think there are solutions that hopefully are going to be in place, but it's very. There's not a lot of time to sort
how
this out.
high up can you go to actually get the influence increased? And
I don't think there's
BBC
any.
must have a lot of weight, surely.
There is, but I still don't think there's any political weight. I think there has been lobbying, but I don't think the lobbying has really had any effect
Been
in terms of giving us frequencies back. Is that right, Alan? I don't think there's.
I wouldn't 100% agree with that. You know, the unique situation in the United Kingdom with 960, 1164 being offered up as you know, potential mitigating spectrum, that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't lobbied and made, you know,
No, that's true.
and the compensation scheme for the UK users wouldn't have happened unless lobbying had happened.
I meant more in the terms of the switch off from 700, though. That was sort of.
700 is a juggernaut. It's been decided way above our pay scale.
Yes,
You know, this
exactly.
was decided at the ITU level, and it's now trickled down to all the different regions.
So PMSE really didn't have any sway in terms of persuading.
No, well, I mean, you can make your in order to get into ITU, you've either got to be an ITU sector member or a national administration. So, you know, PMSE per se, you can try and influence the national regulators, but you know, the whole sell-off of spectrum is a very complex issue,
Yeah.
and you know, you have governments involved who are looking to raise revenue from mobile companies that maybe don't pay as much tax as they should, but let's not go there.
Yeah.
You know, you've got a whole bunch of sort of consultants and all the rest of it that are arguing that the most efficient use of spectrum is for more mobile, and they've been very successful in the past at lobbying to do that. But what I would say is that I have a feeling that the tide to some degree is turning. The latest we hear is that there's a move going to come out of the Arabic states, or one of the Arabic states, at the next World Radio Conference, which is this year, to give a primary allocation for mobile IMT to the whole of 47694. Now, this is what happened in 2012 with an African country that came to, and that's how we ended up with the 700. What I do think is that broadcasters, regulators, are, you know, and all concerned parties are a lot more aware now. The 700 move in 2012 came completely out of the blue. It wasn't on the agenda item or anything like that. Now, we could have a similar situation at this World Radio Conference, but I think that the broadcasters, certainly at the last World Radio Conference, were very well organised, and they managed to push back against an American move to release 600 megahertz. So, you know, this stuff is going on at very, very high level, and there are policy decisions being made which then trickle down that end users like us have to deal with, or manufacturers or end users.
Is this just a high-level political negotiation going on, or are there any talk about, you know, appropriateness of whatever frequency is to do whatever it is that's being done on it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a high-level
it seems
decision.
non-practical way of doing it to me.
The clearance of 700 megahertz is happening right across the whole whole of Europe.
We're going to move to 5G, are we? Where are we going to go from there to the next
5G,
band?
can you tell what it is yet?
Well, I don't know.
Well,
I mean, you know, it should be
they'll-
a dramatic breakthrough,
they
but
may
is it going
put
to be
5G in
appropriate
there.
for our industry?
They may put 5G in there, but 5G is quite unique, I think, because this time round, if you look at 3G and 4G, it was exclusively a mobile technology. Mobile. What people are talking about with 5G is that 5G will be a platform, and across that platform, you could have different verticals. Now, one of those verticals could be PMSE.
Indeed.
One of them could be factory automation. One of them could be all sorts of different potential applications, which are not strictly speaking mobile phones, but using the 5G technology, which is being developed at 3GPP, which is primarily based at Etsy, but they have meetings all over the world. So this time around, it's a different type of scenario. So it could be 5G, it could be 4G. We don't know. But the decision to clear 700, European Commission all the way down across Europe, that's a done deal. There's nothing we can do to change that. But what we can do is try to work to mitigate it as much as possible. So, in the UK, we have this compensation deal. We have alternative spectrum which has been offered. In itself, it's controversial, the spectrum. But any spectrum that's alternative spectrum that's offered is going to be controversial because it's all full. So whatever incumbent you come up against, in our case, in this situation, in the meetings that I go to, FM51 and SE7 and these sort of CPT meetings, I'm having discussions with the aeronautical community.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if they'd have offered up 1525 to 1559 instead of 960, 1164, I would be having discussions with the satellite community because there is no virgin clear spectrum. Unless, of course, we talk nicely to the MOD and they give us a nice big chunk. But that's
Bloody hell, Terry, how do you get your sanity in all that?
Say again?
How the hell do you keep your sanity in the middle of all this? I mean, it must be monstrous. They're just keeping hold of the plot, isn't it? Really, thinking clearly.
Don't worry, I lost it a long time ago. I'm quite.
I know. I'm not going to say yes. I know that. But the two issues coming. One is compensation for all this money we've invested in this. I mean, how is that work? Is it working now? Compensation.
The compensation.
And how do we plan for it ahead?
The compensation scheme, I think, is a very good one. It's better than the 800 compensation scheme. The first set of terms that were put out, if you like, were challenged, and they were improved. The question is, what do people buy? That's the question. It's all very well getting compensated for equipment in 700, but you get some money, great. But what equipment do you buy to replace it if where you are operating there's very little UHF left?
Well, I have to say, how do you plan for that? What do you do?
We're talking to manufacturers, and certain manufacturers are saying the spectrum you've been given by Ofcom is UK only, so therefore we're not prepared to gear up to make product for that spectrum.
Helpful.
Because it's just UK. They don't see a big enough market in the UK. So I know that Alan, you can probably talk more about whether it's going to be opened up in Europe from some of the meetings, but there is resistance to open it up, I believe, in Europe. Obviously, if we can open it up in Europe, then scale. Certain manufacturers might then be interested in.
One of
astonishing.
One of the Commission's cornerstones for spectrum policy is they want to see more sharing of spectrum. Now, PMSE sharing in the 960, 1160 band.
Explain what PMSE
right.
is.
PMSE is a generic term, an overall term that we use to describe. It stands for Program Making and Special Events, and it covers things like radio microphones, in-ear monitor systems, to some extent talkback systems.
It's the area in which
it's a generic
these devices
term.
operate. Yeah. Okay.
So I've lost my train of thought now.
Sorry, I know.
Across Europe.
I had to ask
that
question sometime. I just had an opportunity.
So across Europe, I think what's very interesting is watching how different regulators are reacting to it. So it's quite clear that the French administration are really not very keen at all. And they've lined up a few administrations behind them. But there are other administrations which are, I would say, sitting on their hands. They're not saying no, and they're not saying yes. There are studies going on within SE7 which need to be concluded by June of this year now. And the studies will show that actually technically sharing is possible. And at that point, other administrations may turn around and say, well, okay, if it's been working in the UK, which it has been, unfortunately Trimo couldn't make it here today, but Sure have had some test systems out not prototype systems, test systems out in the field since 2016. Visicom, I don't know if anyone from them is here, they've had some test systems out. And Ofcom developed a software tool which shows people what frequencies they can use in that band, depending on where they are geographically. And it all works, fine. So, from our opinion, sharing in this band is possible. And once the CPT studies are finished and published and approved, then administrations will have to take a view on whether or not they're going to allow the same thing to happen. But administrators, quite rightly, are very cautious people. We're quite lucky in a sense. And 10 years ago, I never thought I'd say this, but we're quite lucky to have Ofcom, who are quite a progressive. They are the only administration that I can think of that have. Not the only one. That's not true. But they've proactively, found an alternative band for us to use, and it's not been the same sort of situation with other administrations across CPT. But I'm going to stop talking because I'm conscious I'm talking too much. And
I'm just wondering for you, Jonathan, what it means to the man on the ground, all this. I mean, is it something you think is going to sort itself out? Do you have any personal views about what it means to you practically?
The benefits of the clearance for a company like ours are unclear to see. That I don't really see, without sounding too negative, the benefits of the clearance to the likes of us. We've got tested, trustworthy kit that's going out the door on these huge scale shows that is being made redundant off of the back of this clearance. So we're spending time, money, and other resources into the testing of the different systems that are out there, the Whizzes, the Shores, we have done some digital tests on 6000 as well, to see how they perform. And, I think it's going to be a difficult path to tread on that front as to what we pick as the solution.
Are you going to be in a position where you have to go with something that works, which you wouldn't necessarily want to have, but in terms of time frame, you need to go with just to make
we won't be making
a workable solution?
An impetuous decision on the product that we buy. We will think about it. We will test it. We will put it in front of the likes of Andy. Andy had some DME kit, some airband kit on a show a fortnight ago, and was quite happy with that from the audio point of view.
Okay.
We were relatively happy with it from an RF point of view. We're working with that manufacturer at the moment to improve upon what we found. But without being too negative, the only positive that I can find out of this whole thing really is that it is pushing the manufacturers
Absolutely.
into pioneering new technology, new methods of working, and therefore delivering new kit and embracing what the landscape is going to look like without 700 meg there, really. So, the future's going to hurt, but, denying it...
How difficult is that to do, though?
Well,
even for Shaw and Sennheiser.
As I said, what this whole situation... I mean, 800 clearance was unfortunate, should we say, but it was copable with. 700 clearance, as we said time and time again to anybody that will listen, is really going to have a bad effect on the high ticket stuff.
Yes,
we're not talking about 4 radio microphones in a school. We're talking about the sort of jobs that Terry and Andrew do. But these are the highest level productions. So that's why it's much more critical this time round. And that's why, because of the criticality of it, is that a real word? I think it is. Okay, good. Okay.
It's a nice Scrabble word as well.
It's pushing manufacturers who have to some degree been complacent because they haven't had to, there's been enough spectrum, right? So why reinvent the wheel when you've got a big enough road? But once the road starts to really narrow and your car doesn't fit, you can't fit your full fleet of cars on it anymore. You need to think about how you make your cars.
Thinking outside the box. You're thinking outside the box.
Yeah, and looking at alternative technologies, looking at traditionally radio microphones, IEMs, they're narrowband systems. Yeah, people will be looking at alternative technologies that kind of move away from that, but that in itself is a challenge from a regulatory point of view, because most administrations have what's called an air interface, which dictates how much spectrum you can take up with a particular type of product. In PMSE's case, it's normally 200 kilohertz. So if you, hypothetically, wanted to go for a wideband system, you've got to get before you can put a product on the market, not only do you have to get that type of system into the harmonised standard and approved and published in the European OJ, which has been done, but you then also need to go to each individual administration and ask them to change the terms of their air interface and remove the bandwidth restriction, which, again, some have done.
I see. That's
and then on top of that, you've got 2 CPT documents, 2510 and 7003. The bandwidth restriction has been removed in those. So a path has been cleared for people to use new alternative technologies. But how quickly people can get those technologies to market, that's the critical question.
And that's the problem we're up against.
I hadn't realised that.
We've got that show to make, and production will expect it to happen.
So on the 1st of May next year, it's still got to be, the sound has got to be as good as it was on the last day in April.
Yeah.
So we can't wait for that new technology to be approved. We've kind of
Yeah.
I'm,
On the run-
painful,
on
I'm
the run-
painfully aware of that.
Yeah.
And on the run-up to that, what you're doing is just continuous product testing up until that point, is it really for you? Or?
Well, I mean, yes, we have to have a reliable system in place, obviously, so we're doing as many tests as we can, and Terry's being fantastic at helping us do these tests, and we're working with manufacturers. But, like I say, we still haven't proven that we can run that many frequencies for a show like Strictly, so I just want to be sure that we are at that point in a year's time and able to do that, and that's really important.
What challenges do you think you'll face, actually, as well as the band? Are they changed the format? Is anything changed within the show itself
don't
that
think-
might
well,
put strain on it? Or?
No, I think productions would not be even contemplate changing the format of the show at all. So that's the challenge we have. We have to make it work.
It's good final words there. Is there anything you'd advise, one or 2 points that for the audience they would need to take away from this session? That think,
Well, that's a bit difficult, not really knowing
no,
where
well,
they sit in
they're
the
looking
whole
more
of scheme
general,
of things
yeah,
related to radio mics.
But you know,
I mean, all I would say is, you know, if this is an issue that really concerns you, and I'd like to think that there are some people sitting out here that it does concern, you know, get in touch with your local regulator in whatever country you come from. I'd encourage you to think about joining APWPT, which is the only global organisation that's lobbying for spectrum access for PMSE, you know, at a global level. Think about doing that. apwpt.org. Go and take a look at that. There's lots and lots of information on there. But get involved, you know, and because otherwise we're going to be in the situation where, you know, it's all too late, and suddenly people are going to be saying, "Oh, well, why can't we do this anymore?" It's like, well, we have been telling you for the last 5 years. You know, it needs people to be involved, talk to their regulators. Then, you know, they're reasonable people, and just make sure that they're aware of if this is going to affect you in your own country. Make sure they're aware of that, and ask them what they are going to do to help you.
I do feel we perhaps should be doing more in the magazine to get regular dialogue going, actually. And maybe an issue we consider as time goes
Well,
on.
I'm
actually.
quite happy to
Just
supply
get
you
elements in this to just come in and tell us how they're getting on.
I'm quite happy to
and
supply you with a
monitor it.
2,000-word piece if you want to publish it. No problem.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's nice of you to do that. I'm just trying to get
No
an
charge,
active
it's
view of
okay,
what the
it'll be free.
I don't know. Right, well, thank you. Well, thank you, Jonathan, Andy, Alan, and Terry. Dementia kits in on
Thanks
Friday
for having
afternoon.
us.
But yes, thank you so much. Thank you. Hope that was useful.